Hi everyone. Yesterday I posted a video where I talked a little bit about some of the challenges that I had from a productivity standpoint and a work-life balance when I had first started my company, and then even later on when my company had grown much bigger. And I had mentioned that I had scoured the marketplace to try to find the very best principles in productivity so that I didn't have to work 80 hours a week anymore, and maybe I could actually get some of my life back. And that's why I'm really excited to have put together a program for people who struggle just like me and want to be able to get more productive with some easy principles. But that program isn't ready yet. So I thought today I would share with you a few ideas that I think you could probably take and start to work in your business right now. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. So let me tell you a story. When I was a little kid, my parents threw out a lot of different quotes. And one of them that they threw out was, "Know thine enemy, keep your friends close and your enemies closer." And I remember as a kid thinking, I don't even know why they're saying that. Adults do weird things. What is this all about? How does this apply to me? Because of course, I'm not going around trying to make enemies. But one of the weird things that I have about my personality, the way I think, is I try to apply everything to business. And so over the years, as I have thought about that particular quote, I've tried to figure out, how does that apply to business? Does it apply to business, and can it actually help us with productivity? And I think the answer is yes. Otherwise, I wouldn't have brought it up. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what these enemies are. There are three enemies that no matter who you are, what kind of business you have, how much experience you have, there are three enemies that are really prone to entrepreneurs to experience. And in order to overcome and defeat an enemy, we first need to know what the heck it is. So let's walk through the top three enemies. So here's the first one: chasing the storm. Now, you probably heard about storm chasers. The idea behind storm chasers is that they go after a storm, but they do that based on a few different motivations. Sometimes it's about curiosity, sometimes it's about adventure, sometimes it's scientific, and sometimes it's media related, where they're going to do a news story on it. Now, think about that concept, because what do entrepreneurs have a tendency to chase? We have a tendency to chase not storms, but ideas. Because one of the things that entrepreneurs are really good at, we're good at two things actually. One is risk, and the other one is ideas. We have genius attacks all day long. We have tons and tons of them. And the reason we have those is because we eat, sleep, dream, think about our business all the time, more than anybody else does. And so that's why we generate all of these ideas. Now, the ideas themselves are not bad, but what happens is when we start to become idea chasers, that's when we get into trouble, especially with our productivity, because you can only do so many things and bring them to completion. And what generally happens with ideas for entrepreneurs is we become these idea chasers, and we go after something because it's new and it's shiny and we're curious, and maybe it looks like a new adventure, or it's going to somehow make us $1 million. And so we chase it oftentimes without thinking. And that is a huge detriment to our productivity. I know I have definitely fallen victim to that one. And so here's how we've got to fix it. Every time you have an idea, you've got to take a look at it and ask yourself one question. And that question is, does this idea contribute to my goals for the month, the quarter, the year, however you do your business goals? If the answer is no, guess what? You've got to set that idea aside. No matter how great you think it might be, you've got to set it aside until you reach the other goals and get those things completed. Now, if the answer is yes, it will help me accomplish my goals, then you've got to sit down and think about, how do I break this down and add it into the other things I need to do in order to get where I want to go? So that's enemy number one. Enemy number two: we never forget. As business owners, we are forced to make decisions all the time. There are hundreds of them every single day. And oftentimes, those decisions, sometimes they're large, they're huge, they're decisions that are going to affect the company or the employees for years to come. And sometimes they're little tiny decisions that may affect only the next hour or so. But the trick with entrepreneurs and where a lot of us kind of get into trouble is in two areas. One is we take way too long to make decisions, and so we just drag it out. We drag out the inevitable. And the other is we don't forget about those decisions. And what I mean by that is we have decision remorse. So you end up making a decision, and a lot of people will go back and replay that decision over and over and over through their head. And they haven't even executed on anything yet. And so as we are spending our time and our energy either trying to decide what to do or going back and having remorse about what that decision was, what it does is it takes away our focus again. It ruins our productivity again. So you've got to get into that mindset of set it and forget it. Make the decision and then forget about it. Even if the decision turns out to be a disaster, and I have had some of those, believe me, we've got to remember that when you make that decision, you're making the best decision you can at the time given the information you have. The only reason why we have remorse later on is because we have new information that then makes us go, oh, wow, had I known what I know now, I wouldn't have done that. But we also have to realize that sometimes these decisions put us and set us up for something that is going to be great that will happen later on. So never regret a decision you made. Whether it's good, whether it's bad, it's always going to help you grow further in some way. And so the other thing that you've got to do with decisions, if you're really going to get over this particular enemy, is give yourself a deadline. Give yourself a deadline to make the decision, and then give yourself, if you tend to be the fretting, decision remorse type of person, give yourself a deadline for the amount of time you can spend thinking about the decision you just made. And that deadline needs to be short, guys. Too often we're taking weeks and months and years to make these, and we become the roadblock for our business and for our employees. Now, enemy number 3, no one is watching. So I am one of 4 kids. I am kid number 3, which I always fondly call the lower middle child. And having 2 older siblings meant a lot of things, a lot of great things, just in case they're watching. But it also meant I had 2 siblings telling me what to do all the time. I already had my parents telling me what to do, and now I got 2 siblings telling me what to do, and then watching to make sure that I did it. And I was one of those kids that if you told me to do something, it kind of made me want to do the opposite, even if I knew that that wasn't really the smart thing to do. That was just the way that, that my brain worked, and unfortunately still works today. But so I was bossed around quite a bit as a kid. So then you go to college, and I'm thinking I've escaped all of that because now I'm away from my parents and I'm away from my siblings, but now I've got college professors telling me what to do. And then I get into the work world and I'm thinking, oh, thank goodness, now I can finally, do what I want. And now I've got bosses telling me what to do. And one of the reasons why I originally went into management in the corporate world was because I thought, well, now I'll get the chance to tell everyone else what to do. But guess what? Unless you're number 1 in the corporation, you always have a boss. So entrepreneurship really appealed to me because I thought this is the one and only time I get to be the boss of everything and everyone, and nobody else can tell me what to do. And so as great as that is, that's also a very big detriment, because oftentimes when no one is guiding you, when no one is watching you, we have a tendency to make bad decisions. That's when we decide things like, I don't need to start work until 10 o'clock. Now, sidebar, I think starting work at 10 o'clock is great if you're productive, if you have the right tools in place. But we decide to start work at 10 o'clock, and then that makes us work later in the day. Or we decide that we don't have to do something. It may be prospecting for new business. It may be finishing up a project. When no one's watching, we have a tendency to procrastinate and put those things off. And so that becomes a huge detriment to us. So how do we fix that? Here's the best way, the only way I've ever figured out how to fix that is you do need a boss when you're an entrepreneur. And guess who your boss is? It's not your spouse, it's not your kids, even though they do a good job bossing too, especially the kids. Your boss is your calendar. Your calendar has all the most important things on it that you want to make sure you remember. When you put an appointment on your calendar, you don't blow it off. When you put an appointment on your calendar, you look at it the day before to know where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to do. And so if we're going to be productive, all we have to do is take that same concept and break down your tasks and put them, time block them on your calendar. Now, then the other trick, of course, is that you actually have to listen to your calendar. Your calendar becomes your boss. So do what your calendar says, even when you don't feel like it. And believe me, there's many, many times when I look at what my calendar boss is telling me and I'm like, ew, that does not sound like a good idea. But you have to do it anyway because you know your calendar. When you put that on the day before, your calendar is smarter than you are. And it's not as wimpy as you are. And it doesn't take emotions into play about whether you feel like doing something or don't feel like doing something. So get those things plotted out on your calendar in time frames that are no more than 90 minutes long, because that's about as long as we can actually focus on something. So there you have it. You've got your 3 biggest enemies and how to actually overcome them. Recognize the ones that you fall victim to the most. I gave you the strategies to overcome them, and just work on one of them over the next 30 days. And what you'll find over time is that you get more and more productive. And in the meantime, make sure that you laugh a lot and learn a lot, because that's what life is all about. Thanks for joining me.